All right, you guys, you are in for a treat today. You're going to get the behind the scenes on two things. Behind the scenes on what it's like to be a parent or have a loved one struggling with an addiction, and also behind the scenes of being in the treatment or the clinical role of the addiction treatment world. What are some of those things that don't necessarily always get said out loud, the things you might not hear otherwise? That's what we're going to hear about. And we have Scott Nunnery here with us. He is a family recovery coach, and he is uniquely able to give you this information because he's been on both sides of the fence. So he's going to kind of tell you about the wisdom he's gained, things he's learned from those experiences.
Mistakes that I've made, yes.
Right. Now, I've got a list of 10 questions I've come up with, and we had 2 more submitted already. So if you've got questions for Scott, go ahead and put them up there. I'm worried we're not going to get to all of them, so you better go ahead and get your questions up there. Get yourself at the top of the list as we talk, and at the end, we'll come back and we'll take the questions from the chat. If you're watching on the replay and you have questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the comment section, because we try to go back and answer as many of those as we possibly can. All right, here we go, Scott. Ready for number 1?
Ready.
Your first question is, what are some of the things that family members often think or struggle with, but they won't say out loud?
There's a few that come to mind. One, I think some of the easy ones, I think shame is a lot of, early on in the process, I think parents have a little hard time talking about the shame of it, the guilt, the piece of it. Maybe if, especially between married couples, it seems to, they sometimes keep secrets from one another, and they're afraid to talk about some things because they may be the enabler piece, or they may have some special guilt that they're afraid to tell each other. The one I think I talk to a lot of dads about that's hard to admit, I guess this is the big one, is when you're in the bad part of it, in the worst of times, and I can think back from my experience. My son had a bad overdose, and I knew he was out driving that night, going to find more drugs. And so I thought, this was probably the 4th or 5th relapse. I was afraid he was going to kill somebody in the car because I knew how messed up they were. And so sometimes you think, would it be better if it was just over? Would it be better if it ended? And so those are hard ones to admit. But I think, if you've got a bad situation, you've probably at one point or another had that cross your mind.
Right. If you've had it bad and it's been going on a long time, it's a natural thought to have. And to me, it's the same as when you have, like, let's say you have a loved one who's sick with any other illness, right? And they're so sick and they're so miserable and they're in hospice, and it's like the family is just killing the family, it's just killing the person. And it's not an evil thought that you have, but it's a natural thought, but it's one that so many people are, they're not necessarily likely to say it out loud.
Yeah, well, it's hard to admit, and but once you hear maybe some other parent to admit it, you kind of feel like you're not the weird one, because that's a hard thing to have come across your mind.
Right. Now, I will tell you for sure that the person that has the addiction, when they're in the throes of it, they think the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
And they kind of are living almost, I call it like passively suicidal, just like if I don't wake up, whatever, because everybody's so miserable, right? Exactly. It's just a terrible place to be caught.
Yeah.
Now, what we have seen, just so y'all know, we have seen many, many, many people come back from that level of difficulty and flourish.
Yep.
So.
And we did. My son's been sober 3 years, so that was about 3.5 years ago. Yeah.
But there are some dark days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. What are some things you've learned since starting to work in the field that you didn't know as a family member when you were going through the process?
I think how common addiction is, how many families that it does affect. Obviously, when you get into it, you start to realize that there's more than just you, but just a number of families and across all economic situations, across all kind of just everywhere it affects. But then I think the other is, as I coach a lot of families now, just how special and unique everybody thinks their situation is. But it's really all pretty much the same. You and I have talked about it. Personality certainly can be different. But everybody thinks, we'll talk to a family that's newly come into to rehab. I'm a parent coordinator at a rehab. And when they come in, they want to make sure that they tell me to make sure I tell the counselor how depressed their son really is, or how bad his anxiety or how bad his ADHD, whatever the but want to say how bad it is. And almost every family says that, so I think everybody thinks it's so special, but in the end of the day, it's
a symptom of the problem. It's on the symptom list. Like
right.
We expect it to be there because it goes along with the issue. And it's hard because you don't want to minimize somebody's issues or trauma, especially, Yep. But anyone that has an addiction is very depressed and very anxious, and they look like they're bipolar. So, exactly. And maybe those things are there, but that would be an expectation rather than like a uniqueness almost.
Yeah.
All right. This is a big one. The big one is, and you've done this a few times, so I'm expecting a good answer out of you, Scott. How do you pick a good treatment center?
That's a loaded question. I tell parents all the time that the treatment center where their loved one gets sober and stays sober for any length of time is going to be the best treatment center to that family, right? Yep. So you can pick a treatment center A, and one family has a wonderful experience, and then another family at that treatment center A will have a terrible experience, and a lot of it might be just the fact that their loved one wasn't ready at that time.
Right. It's timing.
It's timing. Timing has a lot to do with it. But I do think there's a lot of good rehabs. There's a lot of bad rehabs. There's tons of choices. And so just some of the things off the top of my head, because I think we've probably been through that process, 6, 7 different places that we actually sent our boys to. I've probably researched 30, but we've paid at 7 or 8 different places. So I think making sure that the treatment, that they have a treatment for what is the most problem. So for instance, if it is dual diagnosis, if they are suffering for some really mental issues, make sure the place has some mental health treatment. Make sure they do have a certified counselor. Make sure they do have whatever everybody thinks is kind of the major cause. So I think that's one. Another big one to me is finding a place that kind of suits the person so that they'll want to stay.
Yeah, and I love that answer. Yeah.
When I talk about that, I mean, like one of my, Zach went to a place that is real big on outdoor activities, and they call it active recovery lifestyle. And so, let's just say you pick that place and your son hates the outdoors. He hates cliff diving. He hates getting in the water in rivers, and that might not be the best fit, because at the end of the day, they are adults and they don't have to stay there. So I think picking a place that seems to match their likes and just, of what they like to do.
I love that you said that, Scott, because right when you said that, I was like, oh man, that's just dead on, because what matters is whether or not the place or the person, whether it's like a counselor, psychiatrist, whoever you're picking, can engage your loved one.
Exactly.
That's it. Because it doesn't matter how good the treatment is or what the message is. It doesn't matter if your loved one doesn't connect into it. If they don't like this person, if they don't like something about it, it's that like that opens the listening door.
Absolutely.
So I just think that you hit the nail on the head. One of our someone else I know, and I did his story, talked about he was in rehab and he was going to have to go sober live, and he was real mad, didn't want to go, was trying to fit. And he said, all right, but I'm only going if they have snowboarding. So his mama found a snowboard in rehab and he went.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's okay. Like there's rehabs on farms. There's, I call it trehab, wilderness rehab. There's rehabs you go to and you raise a puppy, there's all kind of stuff. And
well, I know this may sound minor, Amber, but Zach, there was a faith-based program that I was considering Zach to go to, but they didn't allow any nicotine. Well, Zach probably dipped 2 cans of Skoal a day at that point in his life, probably smoked a pack of cigarettes a day. And I just knew if I sent him there where they wouldn't allow him to dip or smoke, he probably wouldn't have stayed a half of a day.
No, I've seen a lot of people leave treatment over that. Like they're struggling bad enough. They need a cigarette. Like that's just not a battle I fight. I've never fought that battle, even with teenagers. I'm not doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I think, maybe even sometimes I think maybe even more important. It's obviously very important that they get the treatment while they're there. But what is the aftercare program? What is the transition program? Does this place encourage that they get out and stay in that area versus sending them back home? I think that's very important. The length of stay. I've tried 30-day programs. For us, it didn't work. I'm not saying all 30-day programs don't work. It has not proven to work for my two boys. But trying to find a place that can get them there for a length of time, 3 months, 6 months, and then has a transition program after that. That is an aftercare program that, the good thing about the facility that my son went to is they have a great alumni program. So they encourage them to get out within, 3 to 5 miles of the place and continue to come back for alumni meetings. And it gives them other sober guys to connect with and try to go do stuff with, go fishing or go bowling or hiking or whatever the activity is. And they're all trying to stay sober.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I think aftercare is a big part of it.
Right, because that kind of leads into one of the questions we had submitted, which was, the question was about like length of stay. Why do some people go 30 days and other people go 60 days? And how do you know how long your loved one needs? And I think Scott is dead on. If you're going to do like a 30-day or something like that, if you're going to do like a 30-day inpatient, it's going to need to be followed up, especially if we're dealing with a young person. It's going to need to be followed up with sober living.
Yeah.
Occasionally, if you're dealing with like an adult married person, you can do a 30-day rehab followed by an IOP or something like that, and they can go back home. But I really have never seen that work for a young person.
Exactly.
So that is a special circumstance.
Exactly.
Their age.
No, absolutely.
It is.
I'll tell you one thing parents seem to get hung up on sometimes too is the actual facility and how nice the facility is, or, maybe is what do the living quarters look like? I can tell you this, if I worried about the living quarters, the place that my son got sober, I would have never sent him there. They live 14 guys in a school portable. Mm-hmm. And so it's bunk beds, it's packed. If you were to walk in there at first glance, you would think, oh my God. But what it does is it helps with connectivity. It helps the guys get closer together. Mm-hmm. There is no secrets of 14 guys living in a school portable.
Yeah, there's no way to be off in your room.
There's no way to be sketchy. There's no way to go off by yourself and to be sketch, because there's 13 other guys in that room with you at night. So I wouldn't worry too much. Obviously you want a clean place, but I wouldn't worry too much about the facility. Zach even told me one time that I sent him to a 30-day place that it was too nice. Yeah. And that they were ripping me off. So I wouldn't worry about the facilities. And then the other one that I wrote down is a lot of people want to ask about the success rate. Is if you're calling up and you asked a rehab about their success rate, if they tell you 90 to 95%, I would
Hang
run.
Up.
Run. Exactly. Hang up. Do not call them back. That is such a hard statistic to measure. And I think if a rehab is honest with you and tells you how hard that is to measure, but also points to some success, I would ask questions like, well, how many guys how many people do you normally have there? How many has gone through your program? If you can ask some questions like that, and they can talk a little bit about success, but if they want to claim some crazy success rate, I'd hang up.
Yeah, I had this marketing guy from a treatment center come up to talk to us one day, and he was sitting, I was talking to me, and he was telling me this big success rate. And as soon as he said it, the same thing else he said, I was like,
exactly.
Like, not happening or whatever, mm-hmm. Right? A good way to measure success, and this is kind of how I like to measure it, is do the people that come through the program feel like they had a good experience there?
Yeah.
Because even if they go back and they use again, but they had a good experience with treatment, they're very much more likely to either go back to that center or somewhere else or try recovery again because they had a good experience with recovery.
Yeah.
And it's about that engagement piece. So
yeah.
Instead of looking at like the fancy environment, it's okay to have a fancy environment. I mean, I'm all right with that. But what's the culture and the atmosphere?
Yeah.
Are the people friendly? Do they seem approachable? Do the other clients there seem friendly and approachable? That is the most important factor.
Exactly. And, of course, I asked about the staff, the experience of the staff, how long they've been there, how long they've been in recovery as a counselor or caseworker or whatever. I think that's important. And then the last thing is I just wouldn't get too worked up over one or two negative views on social media. As I told you, this particular rehab where Zach was successful, I've sent a few people there, and most of them have been successful, but one or two have had a terrible experience. And it just so happens that at the particular time that they went, there was a certain, obviously a part of the rehab is the client group that is there. And you get two guys together that, are trying to find some trouble together. They may find the trouble together and it may not work out. So I think I wouldn't worry about a couple of negative reviews if you see that on the internet.
Right. Well, if you see a bunch of reviews, you see a couple negative ones, it lets you know those reviews are real.
That's
real.
What
I say.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Let's see. What are things about the addiction treatment process that families really don't understand? And we may have just answered a lot of that in some of that conversation we have, but anything we didn't say?
Yeah. Sometimes I think families don't realize how much influence they can have even while their loved one is at treatment. And that could be on a positive manner and a negative manner. Again, being a parent coordinator, we get involved with a lot of parents, and sometimes we just ask the parents because as parents, we're trying to still fix it. We're still trying to control it. So they sometimes we just ask them, and we call it just if they'll just get out of the way, let the process work, and not influence it in a negative manner. And by doing it, and one of the ways to do that is to work on yourself. And so the positive piece of that, how can you have a positive influence, is to work on yourself. Let the rehab, the intensive outpatient or the residential treatment, whatever it is, let them work on your loved one. You work on yourself, and it seems to work so much better.
Oh my gosh, yes. I could just say amen to that.
Yeah. We tell parents all the time, I promise you, if you're wherever they are, whatever treatment they're in, if they have a parent meeting, family meeting, and you go to it, they recognize it, and they know you're either there or you're not there. And we realize that you can't maybe make every one of them, but the point is, if you get active in the family piece of it, I think you can have a good positive influence. But stay out of their treatment.
Just,
because you can't.
If they're in treatment state, I'd say all the time, and Campbell asked her time I say this, and I say, I usually see the addict, and you and Campbell usually see the families, and I say, let me tell you what, those of y'all who haven't seen Campbell, she's real tall and skinny. I'm like short and round. We look like number 10 or something. But anyways, I say all the time, like, you know what Campbell does for me? Why she's so skinny is because she has a big old crowbar in her office, and her whole job is to pry the family's bag and hold them there while I work with you. Literally. And then I can say, we need 10 more minutes or 6 more minutes, and she's got to figure out how to hold them there. And then, she laughs. She's like, yeah, that's kind of what I do. Yeah, that's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's see here. What is one thing you wish someone would have told you when you were going through this?
How hard it is. When we first got in it with our first son, we literally just thought we could send him off for 30 days, pay the money, and they would fix it. And just didn't have a clue how hard this process can be. Now, it's not for every family. Sure, there are the exceptions where somebody goes off to a 30-day rehab, comes home, and never touches a drug again in their life.
Hold on. I also want to say something about that. That does happen, but it only happens if there was a lot of craziness before they went to that rehab.
Yeah.
They have to have the trouble is coming somewhere, or it's not addiction.
Right. Or it's not addiction.
Right. Yeah.
So I think just if I'd have been told a little bit of how hard it was early on, and then I was told this early on by Campbell and a couple other counselors that ended up for them, it was one of the best things that ever happened to them. And I couldn't understand that at the time. And most people can't, that's not uncommon, right? You just can't fathom how in the heck somebody could say that. But looking back on it today, after being through it for about 10 years now, I can say the same thing. It certainly was, it has been a huge help in my life for me to make good changes and become a better person.
If you make it through this, whether you're the person with the addiction or the family, you will come out a stronger, better person. Absolutely. There's no way around it.
No way around it.
No way around it. That's right. All right. Is there anything you wish you would have done differently looking back as a parent?
A bunch.
Okay.
I think the main thing is I wished I would have recognized it sooner. I was in denial for a long time. I had my head in the sand. And so I wished I would have been able to recognize it sooner, that it was a real problem, not just teenagers trying things and normal. It wasn't normal. And I had my head in the sand for a long time. And then I think the other part of that is if I would have asked for help sooner, I think that would have also have helped me realize that it was more of a problem than it actually was. But just reaching out for help, because I guess we went through it a good probably 2 years before I ever had counseling.
I love that you said that, Scott, because I just want to make sure you guys heard Scott. So I'm going to repeat it here. He said, I wish I would look for help for me.
For me.
Sooner, not them sooner.
Yes.
Because it wouldn't have worked for them sooner. They weren't ready.
Right.
But the person could be ready sooner if the family gets ready sooner. That's 100%. Right. Yeah. I love that you said that. That's great.
Yeah.
Is addiction treatment really worth the money? How do you make these financial decisions? Especially, it's like, it's your family, right? It's your loved one, and it's your kid or it's your husband. Like, do you ever say, I'm just not paying, it's not worth it, or I'm not paying again and I'm paid 10 times, or what, like, how do you navigate the finances of all that?
I do think that is unique to every family because everybody's economic situation is different. And I say to people all the time, if we could, let's just say, it doesn't matter the family, really. It doesn't matter the economic situation. If I told you today that to fix your problem, write me a check for $100,000, I think every family would find a way to find that money, would write that check, and we would fix it. It would be fixed.
Right.
Everybody would find a way to do that. But in the addiction process, there are no promises. So we could pay $100,000, we could pay $500,000, but there's no promises that it's going to fix it. So I think that's the real hard part. Mm-hmm. And then, after if you've paid for 3 or 4 and you've paid out that $80,000, $100,000, $150,000, it's like, when do you stop? Mm-hmm. And so I think I tell people that, don't go borrow money. Addiction can take everything. It'll take all your money. It'll take your marriage. It'll take everything if you let it. And then there's still no guarantee. So I certainly wouldn't suggest borrowing money. I think at some point you have to draw the line and say, this is all I'm going to pay. Generally, we have more than one kid, and that we have other people to take care of. We have to look for our own, like in my situation, not too far from retirement. But at some point you got to say, I just can't do it.
Right.
We just looked into a situation for my son, youngest son, for mental, it's mental health and addiction treatment. And we just got the information back yesterday. It's $27,000 a month. And it's like, we can't afford that.
Right.
And so, there's situations where I think, just depending on the situations. So, and there's a million ways to get sober. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be in treatment residential at the nicest place in Arizona or in California, right?
Right.
It could be literally them going to pick up a chip this afternoon at an AA meeting, and it's free. Mm-hmm. So it's but do I think it's worth the money? Yes. Mm-hmm. In my situation, for both boys, I think it's been worth the money. One is still finding his way, but we are going to try to find another facility for him because I think the money that we've spent this past year and a half, even though it hadn't gotten exactly the results we wanted, we've seen improvement.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, I will say, well, for one, before I forget to mention it, in the links in the description, I'm going to put, Scott has a list that he made, Scott's checklist on sort of rebuilding your family after addictions happen. I'm going to put that link up here. And if you're watching on YouTube and you look in the description, I've got some links down there to addiction treatment guide that will help you understand all these questions, like how long, how much, is insurance right, all those logistical understanding. And one of the things you can do financially, make a good decision, is understand what options are out there and what you're buying. Don't just, throw darts at the board just willy-nilly. Like, that's the way you're going to waste money. And when you make a financial decision, make it knowing it's probably going to take more than one. Yeah. So if you are going to spend $100,000, then you might want to do like 30, 30, and 30 or something like that, because it's probably going to take more than one.
Yeah, and Amber, I guess the last thing I'll say about that is, sometimes I think people think the more expensive it is, the better. We have absolutely found that not to be true. So just because one place is 15,000 and another place is 5, don't think that the place at 15 is the best choice.
Right.
So I think there's certainly a lot of affordable places that offer some good care.
It is complicated. And I will say that, like, especially when you look at sober living, the price range is like literally it ranges from $100 a week to $15,000 a month. I mean, it's a huge difference.
All over the place.
And Scott is right when he says, just because it's the most expensive doesn't mean it's the best. But I will say this, if you're looking at a sober living and they're charging $100 a week, there's no way they can pay staff to be there.
No.
And if there's not staff in a house with, 10 teenagers or 20-year-olds with drug addiction, not the good plan. So it's a balance. Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah. All right, let's see. What's our next one? If you could make family members understand one important thing about the process, what would it be?
Kind of like what we talked about before is that, you can't fix it. And when you finally learn that, and when I finally learned that, it helped, until your loved one is ready to get sober and ready to make a life change, and they're sick and tired of living the way they're living. That's when they'll start showing improvement. But you can't control it. You can't fix it. All the begging, crying, pleading, all the, the enabling, all the stuff that we try to do as parents, it doesn't help. And they're going to get sober when they're ready to make that change.
Right. One thing I think families can do is they can help their person get ready faster. They really can't fix it, but you can help someone move through those stages of change faster.
Absolutely. And that's where we talked about the influence. Yeah. We definitely think you can have a lot of positive influence. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever, did you ever get frustrated as a family member dealing with addiction treatment centers, counselors, providers, psychiatrists? If so, what were your frustrations?
We've actually had really good experiences. I got frustrated trying to find the place. That process of trying to find out what is the cost, what are the treatment options, all that kind of stuff is it's not only frustrating, it's just complicated, and it's so overwhelming. You don't know what to do.
Right.
And so I found that process very frustrating. But once we actually found the place, we've actually had really good experiences so far where I really haven't found myself really frustrated with the actual facility. But the whole process of trying to get them there is very frustrating.
Oh my gosh. Yes. You're so right on target about that. And that's why I tell family members, start that process long before your person's ready.
Absolutely.
Because it's not something you can scramble and put together quickly. It is. I mean, even as somebody in the system, it's the most pain in the butt thing I do is try to figure that out. Like, it's just difficult, complicated. So start that early. Know what you start thinking about colleges early, start thinking about this early.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you ever get frustrated now as a recovery coach dealing with families? If so, what's the most frustrating thing? All right, here comes the confessions.
I was going to say, these might be the confessions and the secrets. Certainly I think us trying to help families, we get frustrated at times, but it's understandable. We understand that families just may not be in that position to make the change. They may not be ready yet. But is it frustrating when you meet with a family for a while and they say they hear you, they understand, you get a plan of action, and then the next week they go out and totally 180 the plan of action and go pretty much against everything we just talked about in session. Mm-hmm. And occasionally that does get frustrating, but we understand that. We did it. I did it. But at some point, you really want them to just be brave enough and to make the changes that are needed and to have that influence that we're talking about, because they do have the influence and they can certainly slow down their loved one getting into help. Mm-hmm. And they can speed it up if we can make some of the right decisions. But occasionally that does get frustrating.
Yeah, I find the same thing. For some reason, when I deal with the person that has the addiction, I go into it knowing there's going to be a whole lot of back and forth, and they're not going to listen to anything I say. It doesn't bother me at all. Like, I'm just like, we're fine, we're going to get there. The families, it's like, I expect them to just like tell something and they're just going to do it, and I get impatient with them. And I forget all the time, like, this is a parallel process, The families have got to get there too, and they do a lot of the same. They do a lot of the same things. It's a grieving process. It's a figuring it out kind of thing. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll tell y'all a funny story about Scott, because when he was saying that, it made me remember. Now, we tease Scott about this, and if you watch his story, which is on the YouTube channel, you can hear this part. But Scott took his son. His son wasn't doing well and was going to have to step up and go to bigger treatment. Look at Scott; it's turning red. He's going to have to go to a bigger treatment. And Scott said, "All right, I'm going to send a big treatment, but the whole family, we're all going to go to Disney World first." We're like, Scott, taking the son with the problem. We're like, Scott, are you sure? And he did it. It's just funny. You can hear about that in his story.
It was a disaster. We still laugh about it because we drove from South Carolina down to Disney World, I think 8 hours, and we're 3 or 4 hours in it, and he's in the back seat. He's so high, and he goes to sleep for about an hour. Then he wakes up and he tells me to pull over. He's going to drive. And I'm like, no, dude, you're not driving. And now it starts to escalate where he's really getting heated and telling me yes. So thank God he passed out a few minutes after that, because I really thought we were going to be wrestling on the side of the interstate, and it kind of got worse from there as the week went on. So yeah. That's what I say. I get frustrated sometimes, but I think back and I look at the mistakes that I made. I'm like, yeah, they were probably very frustrated with me.
No, we weren't. We just thought that was funny, honestly. All right. Here's another one that got submitted earlier, and that one is, how do you talk to someone about going to treatment?
Yeah, I think, timing is certainly a big thing with trying to get your loved one to go to treatment. And I think you put it good when I've heard you talk about it, is you want to use that at the right time, and you don't want to overuse it. If you're always threatening to send your loved one to treatment, that's going to get old and not going to work. But, if you can get them to that situation where they really have no other choice, and they're willing to just put their hand out and take a help from somebody, I think is the timing's huge. And then also, as the family can, I say the family can influence the fact that it is really a survival decision. It's the only decision at that time that they can make. And I think, and then having empathy, I think obviously empathy with the situation, encouragement that you can do this, those kind of things help as well. But
no, yeah, Scott is right on target, because, I have so many people that we see, their family has been telling them for 5 years, you need to get help, you need to get help, before the person even thought they had a problem. So when you start doing that, the person just tunes you out, and then you're just in irritation. But if you wait until the right moment and say, hey, I think so, you don't even have to push hard. You can just sort of thump them and they'll just fall into it. But it's a timing thing, Scott. You're right about that. Yeah.
We said with our boys that our boys really never seemed to when they were in addiction, they didn't make a good decision until that was the only decision, till they were forced to, really. Mm-hmm. And that's when they seem to make good decisions and say, hey, I need help.
Yeah, you got to wait until the idea of going to treatment seems better than the alternative.
Yeah.
If you're saying that too soon, it's just, there's laughing at you like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Yeah. All right, here we go. Out of Sight says, I'm a vocational counselor at an addiction program. How do you guys feel about the vocational aspect of treatment? Oh, this is a good question, Out of Sight. What you think, Scott?
I think it's awesome. I think, to try to get a person involved in something, a vocation that they enjoy and that they love to do. And I know there was a woodworking program at one of the places that my son went to at one time that seemed to really work. The guys that got in there really like to do things with their hands. And, again, what I think you're trying to teach them a lot of things, but one way is a new way of life and a vocation that they would get interested in. So I think it's a good piece of treatment.
Yeah, if there was one thing that I could think to add to treatment programming or that was more accessible, it would be vocational stuff, because a lot of sober livings and stuff, after you're there so long, you do have to get a job, but then they have a hard time getting a job, right? And the vocational piece is so important. It gives, a sense of structure. Yeah. When you have to go to work, you have your accountability, and plus you're just busy, and you've got things to do. And you feel better about yourself. There's just so many reasons why that really should go up there with the group counseling and the psychiatry and all that. Really should go up on the list, right up there with that stuff.
Yep.
Jennifer says, do you think a drug addict of 20 years who's also ADHD can find full recovery with without therapy or professional help? What should be done if they refuse help, claiming they can do this on their own?
Wow. I think, 20 years in addiction, to do it on your own is really hard. And we kind of talked about, I think you hit on that earlier when you said the age matters, right? Is that can an adult maybe at 40 years old go into a 30-day program and get detoxed and kind of get some of that physical dependency of the drug away from them, to try to help them? I'll never say never on what might work. I think it could work, but I think that would be a very difficult situation. Somebody being in addiction that long and doing it on their own that's an uphill battle.
Yeah, Jennifer, what I would say to that is I don't think you can beat addiction on your own, period. Now but that doesn't mean you have to go to inpatient treatment either, right? There's a lot of ways, to me, when someone says do it on my own, that means like literally I'm just deciding tomorrow I'm done with it and that's it. Like,
yeah,
I'm not going to go to a meeting. I'm not going to talk to a counselor. It doesn't have to be 6 months of treatment kind of help, but you're going to need, the reason that is, Jennifer, is because you can't trust yourself when it comes to your addiction. You can't. You have to turn the reins over somewhere, somehow. And so, yeah. And the ADHD part, that's one of those special circumstances that feels like a special circumstance. 95% of people I see have ADHD. Scott's son has it real big. Yeah. So that's just a given.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nicole says, how do you try and remain calm and supportive when they're in active addiction in your home? And if you're able to, why would they want to change if things are fairly pleasant at home? That's a two-parter.
Yeah. Again, not knowing the age piece makes it a little bit maybe more difficult to answer, but certainly them being in the house with you, let's just say they're 18 or younger. I mean, that's something that you're going to have to deal with. But I think the whole thing of you going to get help for you, whether right now it sounds like they don't think they have a problem, so they're not looking for help. I would suggest for you to go get help and talk to a counselor, explain the situation, and let them give you some advice there. Would be one of my first thing. I wish I would have done that so much sooner. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
It's going to be really really hard to stay calm when it is in your house.
Yeah.
I do think it's important to do the best you can. I can speak to the second part of the question, which was, if you are calm, does that make the person less motivated because their environment's pleasant? I don't think that that's the case, because the first thing we try to make happen is get the families calm, and that increases the chances that the person will go to treatment. Because as long as you're yelling and screaming and fit throwing and threatening, they're focused on you as the problem, and that is blocking their view of seeing that they have problems. So the first thing we do is make it go away, because that's when the person can stop blaming you and have to look at what they're doing to their own life. So yeah.
But a piece of that is just, stop trying to be the police, stop trying to find all the things that would get you upset. Again, some of it is right up in your face and you can't help it. But yeah, it is hard sometimes to be calm.
Yeah. Try Al-Anon and Ar-Anon groups for help. If he isn't, I think Kathy must be answering somebody else there. Then. Yeah. Let's see here. CR says, I'm reading Codependent No More while my son attends rehab. Also joined 2 family group. Family is Anonymous is one that helps. So that's good. You're working on you.
Yeah, getting educated is huge. Reading all the books you can. Golly, I read the codependency books, the enabling books. But getting educated is huge. It's a big help. You got to know what you're dealing with. You got to know how to work on you and those family. I think the support groups are awesome. When you talked about don't know how the addict would do it by themselves, same thing with a family. I strongly urge families to get involved in some type of local family group.
Mm-hmm. All right, here we go from Angela. My son is threatening to walk out of rehab in another state. We said we would financially support this. How do I handle the fear of the unknown? Wait a minute, Angela. Are you saying? I think she meant to say we said we wouldn't support this.
I would assume they would.
Pretty sure that's what you meant, Angela.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go on that. Okay.
we deal with that all the time. Again, being parent coordinator at a rehab, is that especially in the first 30 to 60 days, the things that your loved one will tell you about that particular rehab, this place is dirty. This place, y'all sent me to a bunch of crazies. I'm the only sane one here. I'm the least drug addict. These guys are hardcore. All the stories that you'll hear.
They don't feed me.
Exactly. I mean, it's
Yeah.
on and on. It's almost like they burn it. They're burning me with cigarettes. All kind of
Yeah.
horror stories. We strongly suggest that you say that you're supporting the place that you sent him, and just leave it at that. You don't have to even say anymore. That we're supporting where you are, and if you make a decision to go otherwise, that'll be on you. And and certainly try to hold to that boundary, and not try to get up, because normally they'll try that. They're certainly still manipulative. In the first 60 days, they're just now starting to get some of their brain back. So they're still trying to pull buttons, push buttons to get you to do what they want you to do. And I would just suggest you to hold strong.
Yeah, I would too. And even if you have those conversations, and even if you can just put it off, so let's talk about it tomorrow. Because if you can just the longer you hold them there, the more likely that is to maybe go away. And I do have a video. It's one I did a while back that's titled like 10 things your loved one's going to tell you to get you to come get them out of rehab, because Scott's right. You can predict them. Here they come.
And I would share that with staff, because what we've learned at the rehab that I volunteer at is that 9 times out of 10, they're telling the parent that, but at the rehab, they're telling everybody they love it. Mm-hmm. And they're telling their counselor and their caseworkers that they like the place, they're involved, and they're showing it. They actually participating and doing the things. But at night they get on the phone with mom and they tell mom how terrible it is. So
or they tell the counselor how terrible mom is.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Check your references. Yeah. Luana says, good info. Thank you for holding out hope and praying that my loved one will have strength to change. I continue to encourage, never give up. God bless. All right. Good encouraging words. All right. My 14-year-old finishes 30-day residential and is not open to going to recommended IOP treatment. He cannot go to support group if he doesn't commit to IOP first. 14.
Yeah. Wow.
Man, that's rough.
Yeah, bless your heart, hang in there. I would. I think there you do have to hold to some boundaries and try to and the strong encouragement. But again, it goes back to that thing. If they're not ready, it's hard to make an individual do something that they absolutely are not going to do. I think I would continue to go to my family meetings, go to get help for yourself. But I think that at that young age, that's tough.
It is, because not only are you dealing with someone who has an addiction, which makes them not be able to think rationally, but you're dealing with a 14-year-old, which makes them not be able to think rationally. So it's like, even if they're sober, they don't necessarily they just can't possibly understand the magnitude of what they're dealing with and why they would need to go to an IOP.
Yeah.
So if you can't do that, then I might say, and I'd try everything to get them to do it before I would offer this other thing, but I would say something like, okay, but if you seem like you're not doing well in any kind of way, then we're agree you're going to do that. Kind of almost like preemptively go ahead and get that on the table.
Yeah.
Jennifer says, while refusing professional help and sustaining from drugs, is it possible for them to transfer their addiction to something else, such as trading stock in the stock market? Seems like gambling to me.
Absolutely. They do have addictive personalities, so they may lay down one addiction and pick up another, and it could be video games, it could be gambling, it could be sex addict, it could be all kind of things. But we have seen that with both of our boys. Yeah.
And that happens whether or not the person's getting treatment or help or not. Like that's pretty common. And some of that addictive personality doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. So I wouldn't necessarily freak out about it. I have a video about that. Like, it's essentially a good trait. You just got to put it in the right direction.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Scott, for being with us. We appreciate your wisdom professionally and personally. Thanks for everybody who joined us here today. And stay tuned next, because there's a lot more videos about how to deal with an addicted loved one.
Hang in there, guys. Have a good day.